Hey, everybody. Welcome back to BigRedEDC and welcome to this edition of Channel Chat. And with me today is Mr. Benjamin Belkin from Jack Wolf Knives. How you doing, man?
Can't complain, JB. It's been a nice weekend. Thanks for asking.
That's good. That's good. The weekends are always time to hopefully reflect, recover, and get ready for the next week, unfortunately. But
right.
I'm not of retirement age, so I still got to do that every weekend. So, but hey, it is what it is, right? We get our time off and then we go right back to it.
Yeah, for me, weekends haven't really been too much time off. I've been working through them. Maybe I'll take a day. But for me, it's like the phone's not ringing, the emails aren't blowing through, there's not a lot of distraction. So I'm able to gain a lot of ground over the weekend and kind of get myself lined up for Monday. And can't always do it every weekend, right? Like, gotta make sure there's time for family and that you're, not spending too much time on any one thing in your life. But when I do have the, blessing to kind of grind on the weekends, I'm always better off going into Monday. It doesn't feel like Monday, it feels more like Tuesday.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's true. Very true. But well, I tell you what, we're kind of going to start this off like you and I were talking just a little bit ago. We're going to start it off kind of like we normally start off every other channel chat. I got a couple of questions I usually ask everybody, but I think and I hope, and I really, really hope people take the time to watch this. I think this one is going to be have a little bit more of a topic to it, which I'm going to really enjoy talking about. And I think it's some information that people really, really hopefully need to know and understand, with guys like yourself, independent designers and so on and so forth. And so they can kind of understand where you guys are coming from at this point in time. So like I said, we'll just start off and say, what got you into knives, or how old were you, that type of thing? How did you get started in the sickness, so to speak?
Yes. Well, I think like so many of us, it goes all the way back to as far as I can remember. And where it was born was with my grandfather. His name was Jack Wolf Belkin, and that's where the name of the company comes from. I named it after him. And that's because my love for knives goes right back to him. And he, not only that, but he was a big influence on my life up until the time he passed away. So my first knife, well, my grandparents lived maybe about a mile and a half away. And so we spent a lot of time with them, and we go over there for dinner a lot. And my grandfather, he was a builder in the Detroit area. He'd come home from work and he had a valet tray before, like, it was cool to have valet trays. And he would do his pocket dump in his valet tray. And, he quit smoking around the time I was born, but he always still carried a lighter. I think he thought it was good luck. So he always had a lighter in there. And he had a Swiss Army knife or two. And that was his thing, was the Swiss Army knife. I think because he really liked the tools and the practicality of it.
Sure.
And so I was just enamored by his pocket dump, and especially those Swiss Army knives. And so, I remember distinctly like snatching them and taking them home so I could, play with them, even though I could barely open them. And my parents would tell me, don't do that. And they'd return them to him. And then, as soon as they all agreed I was old enough, that's what I got. I got my very first Swiss Army knife. And from there, it's just been with me ever since.
Very good. Do you still have that one?
I don't know, honestly, because by the time, I was like 10 or 11,
Sure,
I had a drawer full of them.
Right.
Like anytime we'd go on vacation somewhere, that's a souvenir I would get. Or my parents would bring me back one from their travels. Sure. And of course, like, knives got lost, being a kid or whatever. So that's where it started. I don't know if I still have that one. Now, what I do have is like a drawer full of my grandfather's Swiss Army knives.
Oh, there you go.
I got to collect after he passed away, and we had to kind of go through all this stuff and, deal with his affairs and things like that. So I made sure to like pick up every one of those I could find and keep them. So those have they're all scratched up and beat up, and I love that.
Oh, that's
Um,
I mean, it has nothing to do with the look of them. It's
None.
all about the memories. Exactly. That's really, really cool. That is awesome that you were able to get those and just have them and keep them and have those memories with you. Oh, that's just cool. That's just really
Yeah.
cool.
And like, I every time I see a Swiss Army knife, I think of him,
Sure.
and
Sure.
whether it's on someone's keychain or at whatever store and they're selling them at the register, it's like, you know, a big part of the emotional experience for me is that, any knife brings me back to that relationship I had with him, and that's really cool.
And it's obvious that, I mean, Jack Wolf Knives, you're developing this company, developing these knives. Obviously, you're staying in on the more traditional, traditional slip joint side. Now, have you always been that way? Are you into the modern knives much at all? Or are you still pretty much a slip joint guy?
Right. So it's been an interesting journey for me. So, of course, the Swiss Army knife is a slip joint, but it's
Sure.
not like the traditional knife we think of in the sense
Right.
of the English and American, pocket cutlery.
Right.
Um, when I was a kid, I went from Swiss Army knives, and then, like you see the Rambo movies and stuff, and then you just have to have these like big fixed blades, and like the movie Cobra. And so, as soon as I was old enough to start going with my friend to the flea market, I was buying all that awesome flea market stuff, and my parents were super cool. Like, they basically said, if you don't hurt yourself with these things or hurt anybody else, like, you can collect these things. And I was like,
Right.
okay, sweet. So I had like the Cobra knife from the flea market, the Rambo 3 knife, the Rambo 2 knife, all those.
Dude, I definitely had the Rambo knife, man. And I don't mean, I'm talking like the cheapo, like that, like maybe 4.99, 6.99, whatever it cost. But man, it had that compass and it had the fishing
Yep,
line. And oh yeah, man. I was the
absolutely. The
king of the
cord wrapped
mountain.
handle.
I was the king of the
Yeah.
mountain at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I was the king of the suburbs, man.
Yeah.
So I loved
Absolutely.
all that stuff. I had like ninja stars. I had like a blow dart gun that was like 6 feet long, had like
Oh,
these
I
big
never had
long
one. I never
darts
had
in
a
it.
blow dart gun. No, never
So,
had one of those.
and like firearms were a no-no in my house. We didn't have them around growing up.
Okay.
And so, of course, I was always fascinated with those too, but like that was not allowed. So it was
Sure.
like pointy
Sure.
objects,
Right.
sharp, pointy objects. So yeah, so I was always fascinated with that stuff. At one point, I was racking my brain trying to remember, but I used to get this catalog in the 90s, and it had like all these knives, and it had like lock picking kits, and it had like pepper spray. It had all this like cool stuff that any
Oh yeah.
teenage boy would just drool for.
Oh, definitely.
And I used to buy these Gil Hibben knives from there, these big fantasy knives. And so I kind of went through that phase, the flea market fantasy knife phase.
Sure.
And then, I didn't really collect much in my 20s and early 30s. I was like working at establishing my career, and I really wasn't collecting much of anything at that stage of my life. But I got back into knives, I would say, like starting in my mid 30s, and I rediscovered folding knives again, but I kind of got drawn to the modern knife thing. So I was buying Spydercos and I was buying Benchmates. And, as a lefty, you're limited. If you're
Mhm.
not wanting to use right handed frame lock or liner locks, then your choices are real slim.
Yeah.
And so I was mostly buying Spyderco backlocks,
Okay.
you know,
Sure.
or like things with an axis lock that was basically ambidextrous so long as I could switch the pocket clip.
Sure.
And so I was like buying and selling and just kind of working through model after model, trying to find like what's the right one for me. Like, you're just on the quest. And I found like, my favorite Spyderco is actually the Spyderco Stretch. It's one that's
Okay.
not super popular, but
Okay.
just ergonomically worked real good for me. So I kind of like that one. And the Dragonfly was a cool secondary,
Hmm.
but they were still like, for me, like kind of lacking something. And it was around that time I kind of caught wind of the traditional knives. Now, of course, I had heard of case, but I didn't grow up around case. Like a lot of dudes in the South or even in the West, or especially in the East, I guess everywhere, right? Depending on what part of the country you're from, I suppose,
Yeah.
gets exposed to case and traditional knives. And it just wasn't part of my upbringing. They always looked kind of foreign to me. And my mother-in-law, when she saw my interest in knives, she gave me a case peanut. It's like that big.
Hmm.
And it had 2 or 3 blades in it. And it was her father's. And like one blade was just snapped and it was like damn near rusted shut. But I was like, okay, like it's got a little charm to it. And so I kind of dug a little deeper. And that's when I came across Great Eastern Cutlery. And I was like, whoa, like pump the brakes, like this is a different level. And you just start to look at it. It's like, not only are these really cool, but like there's a huge learning curve here. And I love a big learning curve, man. I like to go all the way into the rabbit hole until I hit bedrock. So that's what happened. And so I start like, oh man, look, they got all these different shapes and patterns. And oh man, this one's historic. And like, why is it called this? And what are these covers called? And what are these crazy blade shapes? And it's just like, boom, mind blown, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the next step was like, where do you even get these things? Like, I see what's in stock because I've already combed through every single dealer and, examined all their inventory, but like, where's these
Sure.
other ones? And so I ended up calling Knives Ship Free
Okay.
because they had
Yeah.
them, and talked to someone over there. And I think it was this dude, Ben, who's really awesome, by the way. And I'm pretty sure it was him I talked to. This is probably 2015 right now.
Okay.
And so I'm talking to Ben, and I'm like, where do you get these? Like, where are people horse trading these things? And he told me about a Facebook group, and it's called Slip Joint Paradigm.
Okay.
And he's like, all the real hardcore, like traditional knife junkies are in this group. And I was like, dude, hook me up. So I got invited in there, and man, from then on out, I was hooked. I was completely hooked on traditional knives. Once I started to bring in the ones that, I couldn't get and that I wanted, and I had to make friends and hustle for them. And, by then I'm on blade forums in the traditional knife forum in their marketplace. And I'm like hitting refresh on my browser to try to get all the ones I wanted. Like, it became a passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew like this is the part of the knife hobby that I really, really enjoy. I always loved the Swiss Army knives, but that was like my grandpa's thing,
Sure. Sure.
and like this was like, okay, this is my thing. And I love that they're related. They're both slip joints,
Right.
they both
Right.
have the same operating mechanism, but I'm kind of digging this old fashioned, handcrafted, 400 years old, but yet still alive, like vibe coming out of this thing.
Right on.
Yeah. And so, I still was attracted to some moderns, and I would on occasion buy stuff. Like, I really like Chris Reeve knives. His aesthetic really does it for me. I don't feel like knives I own have to drop shut or flick open. It just
Sure.
doesn't. I think it's cool, but I can appreciate something you slow roll,
Hmm.
because I'm a slip joint guy.
Right. Sure.
So I do own several Chris Reeves that I've bought over the years, but aside from Reeves, I really haven't been too deep into moderns. I've bought and sold a couple Microtech OTFs here and there. Every once in a while, you get that like OTF itch. Got to have a switchblade,
Sure.
but
Sure.
really, it's been the slip joints. And after, you know, and I never stopped with the GECs really, but after I amassed a very large collection of them, it's like, what about the guys making them by hand? What about the customs? It's like you don't even want to look there because you know what's going to happen to you, right? And it's like, oh gosh, but I can't not. And then you see the quality and like the style and everything, and you're like, damn it, now I need some of these, you know? And so I kind of identified some of my favorite makers. And I just kind of stuck with that. Like my all-time favorite to the end of time is Pena Enrique, my friend, my mentor, and I think the greatest knife maker living now that Tony Bose is gone. His stuff is just blows my mind. And there's a gentleman out of Brazil called Ricardo Romano. His
Okay.
work is beautiful. Gentleman out of Oklahoma named Brett Dowell. I love his work. And there's a gentleman in Japan named Ryuichi Kawamura who makes some of the most beautiful knives you've ever seen. And so instead of like chasing all the custom makers and trying to get a sample from one and from everyone or something, I just kind of stick to those guys.
Sure.
And that's kind of where it's like kind of stopped for me
Okay.
is Great Eastern Cutlery. I love them. They come out with a pattern, that either they've never done or they haven't done in a while, and I'll get enticed to buy it and put it in an EDC rotation. So I'm always keeping my finger on the pulse of what they're doing. And if the hankering comes up, what's nice about the custom guys is, you reach out and get on their books if they're still open.
Yeah.
If
Oh, yeah.
not, you've kind of forged the relationships with some of the other collectors, and they don't forget what you got. You know what they got because you don't have usually a ton of those.
Right. Right.
So sometimes there's some of that horse trading that goes on.
Sure.
And so yeah, man, sorry, long-winded, but
No, that's perfect, man. That's perfect. That's awesome. So, okay. So what got you into designing your own knives?
right. That's a good question. So I turned 40 almost a year ago in November. Okay. And leading up to that birthday, I was thinking about like, what am I going to do with the next 40 years? What do I want my legacy project to be? Because I've had a successful career. I worked for people in the beginning and then I became an entrepreneur and I've worked in more than one industry. And I've never really felt like it was my thing. I've had partners in enterprises that they sort of had the creative birth of, or I've been like a role player, and it's just never been like my thing. So that was kind of where my head was like, what's going to be my thing? What's going to be my legacy? What can I put the next 40 years of heart and soul into? Okay. So I've got really two passions. I've got knives and firearms. And I actually have a firearms dealer's license that I've had for years. But man, I can't figure out how to make money with that license, honestly. It's complicated. There's a lot of red tape, margins are really low. And I've just learned, at least for me, better off keeping that a hobby, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I started thinking about a knife company. And like having some business experience, I'm always like looking at the puzzle pieces and trying to see if I think I can put them together to make a really nice picture, to use an analogy. And it's like I'm looking at puzzle pieces and I'm like, man, I got a lot of these puzzle pieces right here. Like I have an eye for design. I know what I would do. I know how to set up the business. I have fulfillment. I think I know how to market this. I think I know what this community really wants. And I think I have a product that is not really being beat to death right now. And I've got some really cool ideas for packaging. And I have a philosophy. What I didn't have was the manufacturer or a relationship with the manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this will dovetail well into what we're going to be talking about later in this chat. But, I had built a friendship with Enrique Pena over the years as a collector of his work. And in doing that, him and I became like personal friends. And some of our relationship kind of evolved around me helping him think through and plan for launching his X series stuff.
Okay.
He was always making custom knives, but he's got a real entrepreneurial curiosity and spirit, and he just hadn't had the experience. So like we'd get on the phone and talk through all that stuff, like the what ifs, kind of the mindset, how to think about things, how to plan for things, how to set goals. and how to sort of execute something, even though it's probably not going to go just like you want, but like, how do you get there along this road? And so when I started thinking of this project, I reached out to Enrique basically to say, like, hey man, do you think that you can put me in touch with the factory who you're using to do your stuff? Is that cool with you? Right? Because like, I want to do slip joints, and you've done slip joints before, and I don't want to step on your toes, but is this something you could help me out with? And he's like, dude, I'd be happy to help you out. I'll make the introduction to the owner. And so that was like one major piece of the puzzle I was missing. And so, and of course, I could have cold called the factories and stuff, but it's always nice to have a personal introduction from an existing client.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I'm forever thankful to Enrique for that, because that, whether it works out with that manufacturer or not, is irrelevant. Like, that's what pushed the freaking snowball down the hill and is letting the snowball get bigger and bigger. So that was one major thing. And then the other one was design. Is like, okay, in my head at that point in time, I'm thinking, I got to get someone to draw these for me. Like, I have the vision, but I'm going to need an engineer or someone to do the CAD work. And so I started trying to draw in pencil on graph paper, and dude, it looked absolutely terrible. Like, I could not relate from my mind to that graph paper what I was seeing. And I didn't have like a good iterative design process to get there. And so I was like, okay, crumple that up, throw it away. This is not working. And so then I, said to Enrique, like, do you think that if I did like a basic kind of online sketch or something, that their engineers can convert it into a higher quality drawing? He's like, I'm sure they can. I'm like, all right. So then I started trying to draw in like a Photoshop type program. And again, it's just like not working. So I'm like, okay, I actually had a lot of AutoCAD training when I was in high school. So I grew up in the Detroit area. The automobile industry is obviously there. And it just so happens that where I went to high school, they had like extremely robust technical drafting and computer aided design program in my high school, because they're basically prepping kids and pushing them right into auto industry jobs.
Okay.
And it was like a really interesting niche. And, I had signed up for it, I don't know, my freshman year. I don't even remember why at this point, just seemed cool. But I really bonded with the teacher. Like, he was my favorite teacher in the school. And frankly, I didn't get along with all my teachers all that well. Like, I butted heads with people. And so I signed up for like as many of that dude's classes as I could for the 4 years that I went to school. And I was just really fascinated by the work. They also had architectural drafting, and I actually started in college as an architecture major, but that didn't last. So, but nonetheless, it was like a path for me to get skills to start as an architecture student.
Sure.
So we learned drafting by hand first on these big drafting tables. We had these ammonia machines in the back. We'd make blueprints. We learned how to use compasses and French curves, and triangles, and real erasers and real pencils. And it was old fashioned now when you look at it.
Oh yeah.
And then after we took the hand drafting classes, they moved us into AutoCAD. And back then it was like a green and black computer screen. Like, there's no color. And you had these big giant boards. They called it a puck. It was like a special mouse. And on the board, it had all the CAD tools, and you could click the CAD tool. But most of it was keying in CAD commands by hand. But what we learned was the fundamentals of how to draw technical drawings and how to build a drawing, right? Like,
Right.
using these keyboard commands like trimming and offsetting and drawing arcs and circles and using construction lines and like all this stuff. So I took 4 years of that. I loved it. I barely used it in college. I was in the building industry out of college. And so I worked for a home builder who was building custom houses. And I would like draw our site plans to submit to the city for review, and put the property lines, drop the septic tank in, drop in the house, stuff like that. It was like basic CAD work. But probably the last time I used it was 2007. So I hadn't touched CAD since 2007. But I'm starting to think to myself, like, damn it, I just need to try to draw this in CAD. Like, what do I have to lose? I log on, I find out you can get a 30-day free trial. So I'm like, literally, I have nothing to lose. So I downloaded the free trial and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, all this stuff's going to be different. Like the whole user interface is different. Like it's going to be like a foreign language. So I open up a drawing and then I just start like typing keyboard commands like L for line, O for offset, TR for trim. And dude, all those keyboard commands are still in the software. They've been in the software for probably 30 or years or more. Now,
Right.
granted, there's all these fancy buttons you can click all over the menus. I don't use any of them, dude. I'm using that software, like like it's 40 years old. But
hey, if it works.
It works, man. I'm sure it could work better. And like one of my goals is to get some training on that software. But like fundamentally, I got the fundamentals.
There you go.
And it was like riding a bike, man. Like all those commands just started coming back to me. And I started to draw knives. And it was like this other feeling inside of me, like, dude, you love this. I could sit there for hours all weekend. I could spend like 25 hours on a drawing and I felt like I was sitting there for an hour. You just like zone into that, and it's like like what it is honestly is an opportunity to express myself creatively that in a way that I enjoy that I haven't had in decades.
Absolutely.
So that was like super cool.
Absolutely.
So at first the drawings were a little crude. Like I wasn't drawing the parts, I wasn't drawing the spring, I wasn't drawing the relationship between the blade of the tang and the spring and the bolster and like where it sits when it's closed, and like just drawing the handle with the blade sticking out of it. And I would send them off to the manufacturer and they would take it from there. Well, it doesn't come back like the way you want necessarily, because when they close the blade doesn't fit. So now they change your blade shape. And it's like, dude, that blade shape like cannot change. Like I perfected how that blade profile needs to look.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, all right, I
Right.
gave you something that's not workable. So then I started like looking at their drawings. And I also started looking at, I also had bought some books. So I'm like at this time now trying to figure out how to draw them complete from scratch. So I'm digesting books, I'm looking at knives, I'm looking at their drawings, and I'm on the phone with Enrique like, dude, what do I do about this? Or how wide does this have to be? Or like what happens if I do this? Just like trial and error, man.
Sure.
And it took, I think the first 5 knives we started with 5 at once. So I drew 5 models and then we worked those through. We had like, I think 14 revisions, 12 or 14 revisions. I could tell they were starting to get like kind of frustrated at me, but it was like, no, once we get through these, I promise you, they're going to be a lot easier going forward. Cause like we're working me through kind of grad school here at a very fast pace.
Sure.
And it's exactly how it went down, dude. Over a few month period, I would say I was spending a ridiculous amount of time in that CAD program, like drawing things and screwing them up and then drawing them again and screwing them up until it's like, okay, I kind of beat that thing into submission. Like the tang looks right and the spring looks right and the blade looks right coming out of the tang. And when I close it, there's not too much tang sticking out and the tip isn't too far in, and it doesn't look weird. And it's like there's all this stuff that can go wrong when you draw those things. And it got to a point where I felt confident that what I was drawing looked pretty good.
That's pretty cool.
It was cool.
I mean, no, and what I mean by that is you said you spent 25 hours and it felt like an hour. I mean, of course, the old saying, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's kind of that type of situation, is you just get caught up in it, and it just seems like no time passes at all. And before you know it, the sun's coming up and you're like, okay, this is a thing now. And But then no, that's just really, really cool that how it developed and how you developed yourself to be able to come through with that. And I'm sure, like you said, Enrique was a mentor to you and helped you out. And that is really awesome that he, kind of guided you through the process and everything. And obviously, made the introduction to, well, should we get into it? Should we get into the thing that we're going to
Sure,
talk
man.
about?
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, we can let the conversation flow. I will say that one of the cool things about these designs I'm doing, and I'll be the first to admit this, is like I'm not reinventing the wheel, right? Like that's what I love about traditional knives is like standing on the shoulder of giants. These knives were designed sometimes 300-400 years ago by geniuses, as far as I'm concerned. And they've been executed throughout the years by men who I could only pray to have achievements that they have. Like I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. I'm paying homage to what I consider to be some of the greatest cutlers that have ever lived.
Sure.
And so what's fun for me is that I can take like, because I'm blessed to have this awesome collection, I lay out all these knives. I got my calipers, right? And I can just like sit there and make observations and say like, how did Ryu Kawamura do his bolsters? How does Enrique Pena do his grinds? How does Great Eastern Cutlery, what's their ratio of like bottom bolster to top bolster? And I can just like examine what I perceive to be what makes these patterns like the bomb. You know what
Sure.
I mean? And it's like, okay, I really dig how Dowell did this, and I love how Enrique did that, and I love how Great Eastern did this. And I've got these books, and I could flip through these books and look at these old pictures of these like English knives. It's like, oh man, look how they look at the swoop on that clip point and stuff. So it's like, it's been so fun for me to sort of like rely on or take cues from people I look up to, you know? So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think I want to give credit where it's due.
Well, sure. Okay. Now, and that brings up a question. That brings up a question for me. And it's kind of like you're saying you're paying homage to these great designers and the people that came before you, right? Now, I've thought about this before, and I want to get your opinion on it. Now, when you go to the modern side of the knife making, right? We're getting to a point to where a knife will come out and we'll say, oh man, that looks a lot like, or, and it's at some point that's going to happen because knives have been made for so long. Okay. And it looks too much like. But on the traditional side, 6 different companies can make a Barlow, and it's a Barlow. Nothing's ever said about that. What can give me your opinion on why that is?
It's an interesting thing to think about for sure. Maybe it's just the sheer period of time that has gone by, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe it's that with the modern knives, we're talking 1980 and beyond, basically. Like we're talking almost everybody's still alive,
Right,
who's been doing
right.
stuff from them. And so I think we associate of modern design with its maker, like first and foremost,
Okay.
like a
Okay.
Spyderco knife. Did Sal Glesser design it? Did Eric Glesser design it?
Sure.
Like even the ones
Sure.
that have been around since the 80s, we still do that. With these traditional knives, do we know who invented the Barlow? Do we know who drew the sow belly first? Like if you do, it's just because you are totally into the history. I
Right.
don't think we have that association.
Okay.
And I think that it's just not important in the traditional knife to necessarily like be different from who did it before. It's like, can you do a good job representing what that pattern's supposed to be?
Sure. Sure.
And so it's like I really like that about traditional knives. And that's one of the things that's really drew me into it is like, man, if you like a trapper, dude, you can get a trapper from like 50 manufacturers and you can collect them back like 400 years.
Mhm.
But if I like the Spider Coast stretch, I got to buy the Spider Coast stretch. I
Right,
can't get it
right,
from someone else.
right,
And, God forbid someone makes one that looks like it. They've got to contend with the fact that people are going to call them out and
right,
potentially
right,
get that bad press, so to speak.
right. No, I thought, I've thought about that before, I like your take on it. It's with on the traditional side, it is more of the history. And I mean, and we all well know all the modern knives, where did they come from? Somebody trying to improve upon, or what's the best word to put it? I mean, a traditional pattern, a traditional knife, somebody trying to improve or bring it into the future, so to speak,
Hmm.
and bring it into today. That's kind of how I've seen it. But I've just thought about that, I mean, like, and I know, don't get me wrong, I know guys like you, like Pena, people that are making slip joints like that, you put your own flair into it, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Without a
And
doubt.
my what I told myself is like, I draw everything from scratch. I don't trace anything.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
you can get real crafty with CAD, man. You can like take a picture and digitize it, and like out. And I don't even know how to do all that stuff, and I don't even want to learn because I know that if I draw it, it is somehow uniquely mine, right?
Sure.
Like
Sure.
you and I could look at the same vase with flowers and we'd each draw it. It's a vase with flowers. It's the same one. We both looked at it, but your drawing's going to look a little different from mine.
Oh, of
It's got
course.
your style, mine has my style.
Of
And
course.
so at a minimum, like always, I will draw everything from scratch. And if I see an opportunity to put some of my own spin on it, like the swoop of the clip point or how much the handle flares out at the bottom, like
Mhm.
I'm also doing that.
Sure.
But
Sure.
I think where like originality really becomes like, did I do this myself? Like, did I draw this myself? You cannot help but be influenced by what you see. Like,
Sure.
that's how we are as people.
Sure.
We
Of
get
course.
inspired. So if
Of
someone
course.
like loves Spyderco knives and they've handled them, I keep picking on Spyderco, I just what's in my head. But if you
Sure.
love Spyderco knives and you've handled them for years and you sit down to draw your first knife, dude, it might just look like a Spyderco.
Yeah, but it just might. Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Right.
get
And if
that. I get
anything, it's
that.
complementary to the them because they had this amazing influence on you. Where
Sure.
I think perhaps I might take offense is like, it's a direct copy.
Well, yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
printed it out, cut it out, put it on a piece of steel, traced it, like you copied it, and when you copy something,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's where I would draw the line.
Right. Right. No, it's just like I said, it was something I thought about, and getting a designer's opinion or thoughts on that. It just popped into my head when you were talking about paying homage to those that come before you. And that's kind of what spurred that question. So
Yeah.
now you've got Jack Wolf Knives,
Yep.
your company, your knives. And I mean, they're gorgeous, man. They're the knives I've seen of yours are absolutely, I'm in love with the low drag. That thing just is, to me, that is just an absolute, to me, that's the work of art. That is a work of art. It's a gorgeous knife. Now, trust me, you've got quite a few. What are we up to? Or 11?
11. I
Are you
got
up to
11
11?
prototypes in hand. There's 3 more in the drawing process, like that I've drawn that were producing 3D models. Then I've got like at least 4 or 5 more floating around in my head that I haven't had a chance to put down on paper, aka CAD, and I'm just chomping at the bit to do it. So,
Right on. Right on. So you've been working this process for a little while.
yep, about a
It's
year.
about a year. Okay. It's been coming out, and we've been hearing, you're working with Riyadh and you're going through the process and everything. And then last week, you come out and you say, well, that's probably not going to happen anymore.
Correct.
Can you give us some background and just kind of work us through that?
Absolutely. So this is what anybody who's trying to do what I'm doing or has done what I'm trying to do, if they haven't dealt with it, they certainly might. And this is one of the weaknesses of the business model, let's just say. So I guess I'll start by saying that I'm very communicative, right? With whoever I work with. I pride myself on being clear, concise, and consistent in my course of business. And from the very beginning, I believe I've been that way with my conversations and dealings with them. And honestly, they were always the same way back. It was very uh, consistent, direct, and straightforward. And I was really impressed. And so, from let's just say September, October of what would be 2020, um, through Blade Show of 2021, so that's June, we made tremendous progress. We had I'd taken delivery of 7 models, prototypes, and then we had 4 more that were being made. And during that course of time, I had communicated certain things like kind of what I wanted to order, as far as quantities go, but it was never really put into it wasn't never set in stone, and deposits were never paid, simply because there didn't seem to be any pressing urgency to do so. On occasion, I would say, hey, what do the lead times look like? 190 to 120 days, basically 3 to 4 months. I said, okay, cool. And I communicated my plan, like, I got these prototypes a couple weeks before Blade. I want to carry them around. I'm not in any rush to get back to you because I need to experience these things in my hand and in my pocket. And I've got this great opportunity to take them to Blade Show and have like 1,000 people handle them and open them and close them. And we'll see if anything bad happens to them. And I get people's
Sure.
feedback on what they like or don't like.
Sure.
So that was the plan. I communicated that, like, hey, I'm going to take my notes. I'm going to collect feedback from Blade Show. I'm going to come back. I'm going to start communicating changes to you. And then we're going to figure out our final plan. Cool. So that's exactly what happened. I promoted the prototypes on social media because I had them. I took them to Blade Show. People were super enthusiastic about everything. It like exceeded all my wildest expectations. I was riding high. Come back from Blade, faced with the challenge of how to communicate all these nuances across 7 models without being able to have verbal dialogue, because all communication, by the way, is through email, basically.
Right.
And you're dealing with, from where I live, a 15-hour time difference. So a lot of times you send a message, you get a response the next day. I tell people it's like World War II era, sending freaking telegrams across the ocean, waiting for headquarters to send you one back. And it's not a very smooth flow of communication. It's not quick.
Right.
It's smooth. It's slow.
Right.
So I'm just like of this mindset that, hey, I'm going to give you these changes. We're probably looking at hopefully like 60 days, 90 days, maybe to get some more prototypes or get prototype changes done. And then another 4 months for production. And so that's why at Blade Show, I told everybody 4th quarter, because it was achievable. It was going to be tight, would have been like a November, maybe early December thing. But that's where everything seemed to shake out. So I started putting together, documenting all the prototype changes. I got spreadsheets, I got photographs, I've got CAD drawings. I'm bundling them into zip files, like the most comprehensive way I can communicate this effectively. And so I'm starting to like share information, and I start asking about the details for manufacturing. Like, okay, let's start figuring out the details. Like, How many are we going to do? How often are you going to deliver them? How many variations per model can I get? Like scale variations, like black, green, and natural is what I had for prototypes. But what if I want to sprinkle in a few more and have more than three, and like, what are those going to cost if they're more premium materials? And like, let's figure this out. Let's get a deposit. And so that was when the first like kind of shocker came through. Was it was all like not like a matter of fact, like, oh yeah, well, right now we've had very large orders before and after Blade Show, and our lead times are now out to, they said July 2022. And it was like, whoa, did I read that right? You know, like, did I read that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's like, could you clarify that for me? And so it's like,
Oh
I
yeah.
got all sorts of expletives
Oh
are
yeah.
spinning through my head. So, yes, that was apparently the case. And it's like, you don't really have the opportunity to have a dialogue like you might with someone who's in business across the street. Like, what happened? Why didn't you tell me? And this, and that. And it's like, it's almost a waste of your time, and frankly, when I would try to sort of influence the timing, the message would not change. I'm sorry, please accept our apologies. This is what it is. Okay. So two things happen at that point. One, you accept what it is. And two, you start to examine the situation. At least I did. Right. And so I'm thinking, it may get worse. That was bad. Bad can become worse. And so I need to start thinking about plan B, because plan A just got derailed. And it ain't always easy to keep the train on the tracks when it gets knocked off.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue to pursue plan A until it's either feasible or not feasible. But at the same exact time, I'm already thinking about plan B.
Right.
Now, I don't really have a plan B at this point. There is no plan B. Like, plan A was the plan. And so I started to work on establishing contacts with other OEMs with good reputation, because I don't like just cold calling people. What I like to do is find someone with an existing relationship who will say, hey, here's this dude, Ben. He's got a really cool project. I know him personally. I think you should take some time to speak with him about what he's up to. I think
Sure.
I like when that kind of thing happens for me, so I just think it works good the other direction. And so that's what I did. Now, fast forward maybe about 2 months, and I'm routinely asking the manufacturer, hey, well, if it's next year, like when, and can I make a deposit? Because, usually if you have a deposit, at least you've secured yourself a place in line, you would
Sure.
hope. At
Sure.
this point, I really have nothing. I don't have a deposit.
Right.
All I really have is prototypes that I paid for and some technical drawings. So as I'm making these, and let me like take a sidetrack here. There's other things going through my mind as well about plan A not looking so good, because plan A originally was, hey, I can buy, let's say, a 1/4's worth of knives at a time. So 3 months is a quarter of a year, because the lead time is 3 to 4 months. So let's say I'm buying 3 or 4 months worth of knives, and then you get those sold, you buy another batch, you're never really buying that many. And so the financial risk is what I would consider reasonable for what I'm trying to achieve.
Sure.
Now you're looking at it like you have a year-long lead time. Is that going to stay that way? Is it not going to stay that way? I have to assume it is going to stay that way. And so, because the goal of a production business is to have something to sell on an ongoing basis, right?
That
You're
would
not in
help.
business if you
That
don't have
would
anything
help.
to sell.
That would
So
help.
it's like, I'm like, gee, buying a quarter's worth of knives is no longer feasible, because I wait a year to get 3 months worth of knives. I sell those. I got to wait 9 to 12 months to sell more knives. Like, basically in 3 years' times, I'm going to sell 9 months worth of knives. It doesn't work.
No.
So you're basically buy a year's worth of knives and then hope to sell them really quick and then buy another year's worth of knives. And you just like the numbers get way bigger. So, but I'm proposing basically just that. Like, hey, if I commit to, let's say, a 12-month production schedule, and here's how I want to roll them out, and here's how many variations I want, like basically saying, like, this is what I'm proposing. I'm not your typical guy coming in I got 300 pieces I want to do and see how it goes. And then if it goes well, I'll buy another. It's like, no, what I'm trying to present is manufacturing certainty and plenty of time to plan in advance for my workload, which I think for a manufacturer is a good thing. Like it's like getting a guaranteed contract from the government. It's like, hey, great. Like we know we've got this work for the next 12 months and they're going to pay us because they're good for it and whatever.
Sure.
And so I tried to put like my best offer on the table. The other thing I was thinking was, if you're one of the small clients you become less relevant to them because they're now dealing with apparently very large orders from their existing clients. So it's like big fish stay on the table, little fish, we don't have time for you. I was like, I don't want to turn into a little fish. I want to establish myself as an important client. So I really put my best offer on the table. And I was met with like, we'll talk about it. We'll get back to you. We're going to have a meeting. We'll talk about it. We'll get back to you. It was never yes. It was never no. And so about 2 months went by until ultimately they said, we cannot commit to anything in 2022. We cannot commit to anything in 2020. Basically, we can't commit to anything. They said, we have received orders that that are buying up our production schedule, and we cannot commit to anything. And we think that it would be better for you to find someone else to make your knives. And that was like, okay, I was
So they
afraid that
basically
would
come out.
happen.
They basically come out and basically told you that you should
They
go
did.
somewhere else. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
like basically saying, we think it's in you. I didn't say I'm going somewhere else. They said you need to go somewhere else.
Okay.
Because I could have said like, well, I'll just wait, but I can't just wait until 2023. Like that doesn't work.
Right.
So
right.
really they left me no choice by saying there's no commitment we can provide you. And we don't want to, and they said, we don't want to hold a deposit for that long. That's not good for you. And it's like, well, I completely agree. That's not good for me.
Thank you for thinking of me in that manner.
Exactly. But it's like, honestly, if they would have said, okay, we'll commit to this schedule, we'll start in like July, August, or September of 2022, I would have been okay with that. I would have figured that I would have made that work longer than I wanted to wait, more money than I wanted to spend, but I probably would have said yes. Now, because they told me we can't do it for you, that's when you take a step back and you start thinking. And I'm thinking like, you know what? I might have been a really bad idea to even have committed to something if they would have said yes, because think about the what ifs, right? It's like, what if the promised September 2022 becomes February or March 2023?
Oh, yeah.
Like that is a long ass time from now, right?
Well, I mean, and not only that, you're promoting these knives. You've been promoting these knives because you've been working on this timeline, and not, people, your customers or the customer base is going to be like, well, okay, are these things ever coming out? And I mean, that's just human nature. Okay, I mean, we've gotten, as a society, we've gotten instant gratification. Okay, he said they were going to be here. I want it. Right. I mean, that's kind of the way we've went as a society. And
absolutely,
this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you and I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize, but that is the key. That is the whole goal of this conversation, is for people to see this. And this is not a condemnation of Riot because that's who you were working with. That's not what this is, because we have seen it with other independent designers working with other companies that are unfortunately getting these same, okay, 90 days. No, now it's 120. No, now it's 145. It's not just Riot. It's looking like it's becoming industry wide.
Correct. And to your first point, yeah, that was a huge concern for me as far as timing, because I had that thing, it was like a symphony. Like when I started rolling out the models, then displaying at Blade, and then I had plans for marketing outreach, YouTube community, like this, and that, and then bam, fourth quarter sales. Like it was a plan, and it was like beautiful music, right? All the way to the end, giving everybody what they want.
Right.
And they just like came in and kicked the drum set over right in the middle of my symphony. So it's very hard you have to mentally sort of come up with a way to keep that going. You have to like think that through.
Yeah.
And then the longer that takes, the more unfeasible that becomes, right? Just like you said, because people see something and they want it sooner than later.
Sure.
And talking about late 2022, early 2023 becomes unreasonable for my goals, for what I am trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
So, on one hand, I was really thankful that they were honest with me at that point. Obviously, I wish they would have told me this months ago, but it is what it is. Right. I am just so thankful that I did not end up in a position where I made a very large deposit, tying up my money, perhaps with no way to get it back because they bought materials or whatever the story becomes, thereby rendering me stuck in the quicksand, and just hugely thankful for that. And so now I'm able to be a lot more discerning. I've got 3 factories that I communicated with, exchanged information with, and already paid for new prototypes. And so those are in the works. And I've got a 4th one I'm communicating with right now. I feel like if I got 4 to choose from, I'm certainly going to hopefully find at least one of them that is satisfactory to me,
Right.
And if they're satisfactory to me, I firmly believe they will be satisfactory to the community, because this is my reputation. This is my big chance. This is like everything for me. I'm not going to blow this opportunity on a product I'm not proud of.
Sure. Of course.
And that's what my kind of message to everyone has been. It's like, I'm being very transparent with you guys on what I'm going through. All I'm asking is stick with me, right? Like, I'm going to fight my ass off to get this done the way that I think you guys deserve, right? The way that I'm going to be proud of. So it's like, and I'm not the only one going through this. You made that point, and it's a fact. The more people I talk to about these things, like at the USN show, and now people reaching out to me, it's like, holy shit, this is happening industry wide. This is not a Riot thing. This is a knife industry thing.
Oh yeah. I know you and I talked before here a few days ago, and I mentioned my friend Adrian from Damn Design. He was working with the company and they had it all laid out, 90-day production, so on and so forth, and they were getting ready, and now he's going through he was going to go through like Kickstarter and stuff, like a crowdfunding campaign to get him going. And he's like, all right, I'm ready to go. And they're like, well, it might be 120 days now. And then, well, I think they got up to 145 days on him, which is still quite shorter than what you're talking about, 2022 potentially leaking into 2023, but he's like, that's not, he's like you, he's like, that is not my goal, and he was like you, he's like, all right, I am gonna go somewhere else and find somebody that can do it for me. and do the quality that I want. And, and it's just so hard for independent designers like yourself, and we hear now, we pretty much know that pretty much all OEM companies are done in OEM work is done in China. There's pretty much, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm guessing it's gotta be pretty close to 90%, I would think.
Yeah, some of the big names do stuff in Taiwan,
Okay.
and they've got big numbers over there. So if you look at it from like a unit count, I don't know what that is because I
Sure.
think hundreds of thousands of units come out of Taiwan.
Okay.
But if you look at like total brands, I think the majority of it, like you said, and especially for a guy like me, it's almost all China. Like I think to go to some of these shops in Taiwan, you need to have much larger minimum orders
Gotcha.
because you're
Gotcha.
going through these large retail distribution. It's a different business model that those shops are catering to.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. But, and the problem is there's really, and again, we talked about this. I don't know of an OEM company in the United States that OEMs knives. Is there one? Have you?
There are a couple niche that are known to do it, but there is not a network of OEM providers in the United
Right.
States.
Right.
And the ones that can do it will pick and choose who they do it for. So
Sure.
it's like totally different. If you have a design and you want to work with an OEM, you're dealing with China. That's pretty
Okay.
much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And well, you can always sell the design or license the design, I guess is probably a more correct term. Where, yeah, it's your knife, your name's going to be on it, or your maker's mark, or whatever the case may be, but it's their knife. It's their brand. It's not going to be Jack Wolf Knives. It's going to be it's going to be the CRKT whatever, and it's going to have your logo on. That's pretty much what you're going to find in the States. And even then, companies like that, they already have their stable of designers that they work with. So you have to pretty much establish yourself in the OEM world, get your name out there, get your brand built up, and then, but then if you've already got that built up, I think a lot of the guys that do it are mostly, well, I mean, we're talking about Liam Ma and guys like that have custom knives that end up becoming production knives for brands like CRKT and so on and so forth. I'm sure there are some that design specifically for a larger maker. I'm sure that probably happens. I don't know the business like the business, trust me. So I'm guessing that happens. It's one of those things, but for an independent designer, it's really tough, and you have to go through things like this, and it sucks. I mean, there's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it.
You look at it like an opportunity like the one I'm pursuing basically did not used to exist. Like it didn't exist.
Okay.
And so for me, it's like I have nowadays, you can set up an online store. You can reach thousands, tens of thousands of people on social media basically for free with just a lot of effort, right? Like without those tools, it's where are you going to get your audience, right?
Right.
How are you going to get them to buy? Like you'd have to go to knife shows. You'll never move enough units because you need the internet to spread your product around. You have now a network of dealers who deal exclusively online, who have extremely large audiences. That didn't used to exist. You used to buy at your sporting goods store,
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like the internet age, the social media age has helped facilitate this opportunity. Now, you also have these OEM manufacturers who will cater to someone like me who wants to use these resources. Well, you didn't used to have that either, really. You just had, like you said, you could go license your design to somebody who had the relationship with these factories and they'd pay you X percent, right, of every model. But that gives you essentially, you might get to negotiate some creative control over the final product, but like you don't own the brand. You don't, you don't, they're not your customers, they're their customers. And so it's just a totally different business model. And frankly, one that can probably be really hands off if you have some really awesome designs. But like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in engaging with my customers, building a brand, being a part of the community, and like being responsible for the success of the business.
Sure.
Versus just being one part of what is a gigantic machine that has a billion parts moving to it. So yes, like it's like something that's this new is inherently going to be difficult. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
because it looks like it should be easy. Oh, you just start a website and you do some marketing and you hire a manufacturer. It's like, no, it's not easy, you know, because you're basically doing something that is it's an industry disruptor in a way, right?
Sure. Oh
It's,
yeah.
you know, the bigger companies that license stuff from dudes got to be looking at like, man, a lot of these guys who have this talent or this vision, they're not coming to us anymore. They're going to these other manufacturers to get stuff made at a wholesale price or whatever. And so like super curious what they're thinking about all this, honestly. And because it's sort of new territory, it ain't easy, man. Like you're sort of having to not convince, it's not the right word. You're starting to have to gain people's trust in what you're doing because you
For
know what?
sure.
You're not Spyderco. You're
Oh,
not CRKT. You're not Benchmade, you know? So it's like, why should we trust you? Why should we buy something from you? And you have to be really honest and sincere about what you're doing and what your intentions are, you know. And I think in order to gain people's trust and have them want to invest in you, and that's not easy. Like you have to have the humility and the heart and soul and the willingness to like put yourself out there and frankly potentially fail in front of everybody, you know what I mean, to show people like, hey man, I'm doing this because I really really want it.
yeah.
And you know, and I think if that's the way you are, I think people will see the value in that and feel like they're supporting someone who's like them and not just some big company that's publicly traded or, you know, has a bajillion-dollar a year budget for marketing and, you know, mass produces everything in huge numbers and stuff. But it's certainly hard, and there's a tremendous amount of financial risk. Like I'll tell you right now, it's a six-figure investment and there's a lot to lose here. There's a lot to lose here. And so it's
Yeah.
not for the faint of heart, dude. and and it's like, and it's gonna consume, you know, 7 days a week of your time. And
Sure.
I don't ever see that stopping.
Yeah.
Because if it's successful, like there's so many things I could do. And I always think about this stuff like all the time, right? Like, you know, you start thinking about, well, I could maybe try to take control over this to some degree and invest in a space here locally and invest in a wire EDM and invest in a CNC machine and either learn how to use these machines or hire a machinist. And it's like, that's not how this started, but that's where this could go, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And I think, and we're now talking about $1 million, well over $1 million invested in a facility to do that kind of stuff. That's not even including material costs. And I think what's cool about this model is it's a way to get there. You
Sure.
know, it's a way
Sure.
to sort of learn and build relationships and create the capital needed to get there, to where you could maybe set up an American OEM for other designers who are trying to do
Sure.
business in America. You know,
Sure.
like how cool would that be? Right?
Very cool. Yeah.
Maybe, you know,
Yeah.
in the process, you're meeting all these other guys who would love to have an American made product. And it's like, well, maybe, I don't know if it's feasible or not, but we could certainly try to figure it out. Maybe we all pitch in and buy a machine and we start cutting parts, you know, and we cut handles and blades here. And, you know, maybe you have to put them together yourself, but I can maybe provide you parts here in America, you know?
That's just kind of what came into mind is kind of like the, I mean, kind of, sort of, but kind of like MKM has done. Mangiano knife makers, a few of the big, I mean, we're talking established knife companies, of course, came together. But, if you get some independent designers that have had some success, and have built to a point, you could come together and maybe create that. Now, when you're talking about bringing in partners, that can bring in a whole different dynamic on its own, because now it's not just you. You've got your ideas, they've got their ideas, and this guy's got his ideas. So but it's a way to get there. Like you said, it could be a way to get to that point and maybe finally have, an OEM for independent designers here within the States. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's possible. It's definitely possible.
We're talking 5, 10, 15, 20-year outlook here, right? We're not talking like around the corner,
right?
But I'm thinking big, and that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
But like, it's got to start somewhere. And I think that these OEMs in China are providing some American companies an opportunity to grow themselves, and ultimately totally up to each individual business person what they want to do. I don't begrudge anybody for any of that kind of stuff, really. But it's like, I'm looking at it as an opportunity to hopefully gain some more control over my products and do stuff in the United States. I don't know if that will make economic sense. It's like a hope and a dream at this point. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But there are
knife makers
somewhere in the US. Exactly. And look, there are knife makers in the USA who have their own shops who make knives. Now, maybe you can look at it and say, well, there's a reason a lot of them don't do OEM work. And, like, that's an obvious truth we're looking at. Like, they have a hard enough time making their own knives,
right? Right.
And so maybe it never goes beyond that. Like, man, I would have really liked to make knives for folks, but for every 10 that someone wants, I can make 2 out of my shop here.
Right.
And I think that's
right.
kind of the reality of the situation. But
yeah.
I do like to sort of at least think big, but then kind of ground myself in the reality I'm at, looking at my 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months down the road from where I'm at. But my head's always, part of my brain's always out there thinking about what could be. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me like motivated.
Sure.
It's like, I'll never even get to see that part of the timeline unless I figure this stuff out.
Oh,
so
without a doubt. So we've kind of went big picture. Well, let's rein it back in a little bit more and talk about Jack Wolf knives.
Sure.
Because like I said a little bit earlier, man, your designs, and it's not just the knife, it's the entire package. The artwork, the packaging. You and I talked a little bit about that earlier too. Can you kind of just talk a little bit about that thought process and what you wanted, the experience that you wanted to create for your customers?
Absolutely. So a lot of people, and I've been seeing this more and more, it's like, what lens do you look through, right? A lot of knife makers, brands that have driven from someone who made knives, like they're craftsmen. They're the most amazingly talented craftsmen in the world. But like, that's what they do. They take metal, they cut it, they shape it, they grind it, and they make something, right? And some of those guys, like, it's hilarious, but some of them don't even carry a knife. You know what I mean? Like, it's the funniest thing ever. It's like, what knife do you carry? Like, I don't carry a knife. It's like, seriously? It's like, I got this buck knife I've had for 40 years in my drawer. That's my knife, right? And so a lot of those guys, their products become insanely popular because they're amazing. But when it comes then to, let's say, having a production knife, they just create the design and then they get it made and they put it in whatever packaging is cheap but still good enough, and then they ship it off to a dealer, and like, that's it, right? I don't think there's a whole lot of consideration necessarily for the customer's experience, because they're not collectors. And I think when I say customer, at least my lens becomes the collector. Because yes, not every knife buyer is a collector. I totally understand that. But I'm a collector. And I think a lot of knives are sold to collectors. And so my lens is that of a collector, and my experience as a collector focuses around my emotional experience from buying knives. Like, I'm not a tradesman who's using his knife every day out in the field, you know? And so, like, when I buy knives, of course, I want a knife that works well and cuts well. But like, I want a knife that delivers to me this amazing emotional experience of like art appreciation. You know, knives are craft art, they're functional art. They're not 100% made to be like mechanically, like only for their mechanical abilities. They're also adorned and made to be beautiful. And it's like, I really respect that part of it. And that's what's really cool about knives. It's like this really artistic tool that dates back to like literally the first tool we ever made, right? And so that's the experience that I have really enjoyed with knives, is the emotional experience I get buying and collecting the knives that really make me feel good. And to me, that's through the appreciation of the art form. In addition, it's like the hunt to get them and the relationships you make to get the ones that are hard to find. And it's like this entire, it's an emotional experience that not only is your appreciation for the item, but built around the relationships and the community in which you engage. And
Sure.
to me, that's like the big picture, is
Sure.
like, okay, if I'm going to have a knife company, how do I like enhance or give that experience to the best of my ability? Because it's not only about the knife, it's about more than the knife. It is about the entire experience in engaging with the brand and in enjoying and consuming their products from an artistic appreciation standpoint. Also, obviously, has to be an excellent cutting tool. It's got to be a good knife, but it's more than that to me. And so that was sort of my philosophy. And I noticed that that's not a shared philosophy across the industry as far as I can tell.
Oh,
So I take a lot of inspiration from Great Eastern Cutlery. I love that brand. I love their style. I love their products. And I'll be the first to admit, like, there's a ton of influence there. But I also knew, like, I cannot compete with Bill Howard. It's not going to happen. Like, first of all, you can't, no OEM can make that product. I've been to his factory. Like, nobody else can make that product but Bill. He is in a town that's been making that product for centuries, in the corner of Pennsylvania on 100-plus-year-old machines with labor practices that if like that factory got hit by a meteor, no one would know. You know, like, you got to have those machines, you got to have those labor practices, you got to have someone in charge who knows exactly what they're doing to get that product. I'm not making that product. I can't make that product. No one else can make that product. That's it. So I'm making a traditional knife, but it's with modern manufacturing techniques and modern materials.
Sure.
And I even showed Bill my knives, and he looks at these, he's like, "You don't compete with me. You have a totally different product." I'm thinking, like, thank God you feel that way, because I didn't want you like blacklisting me from here. Like, I don't ever want that to happen. And so I can't have my product packaged like, or to have the same character as his or
Sure.
other traditional cutlery that's similar in nature.
Right.
And so I thought to myself, like, what can I do different, but that's still sort of consistent with how traditional knives are consumed, how the experience of buying and collecting traditional knives goes about. And that's when I started to dream up like my packaging concept and my artwork concept, because I love, okay, first of all, everything you buy comes in what? A box, a freaking box, right? Some boxes are nicer than others, but it's still a freaking cube or a rectangular shaped cube. It is a box. And what is the one thing that I buy that I love that does not come in a box? It is a Great Eastern Cutlery knife. And it comes in a cardboard tube, a cheap, basically mailing tube with plastic pop caps and a piece of wax paper inside with a knife wrapped in it, and sometimes a lapel button. And also, really cool, kind of vintage inspired artwork on the outside of the tube.
Mhm.
And it's like, man, you know, when you buy that Great Eastern Cutlery knife, you are excited to get your hands on that tube,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
want to look at the tube, you want to pop it open, you want to like uncrinkle that wax paper, and you're a moron if you throw the tube away because now you just devalued your knife, right?
Yeah.
Like no Great Eastern Cutlery buyer wants it without the tube. It's like you just lost like probably 20-30% on your knife because you pitched the tube, which like if you think about it is crazy. So,
No,
you
but from
know,
a
that's what
collector's standpoint, it's all part of it.
it is, right? It's part of the experience. And it's like you are engaging, and that's what really strikes me is like you're engaging in that experience before you ever see the damn knife. Like you are already like, oh hell yeah, this is freaking awesome. Like you're already having that before you even open the thing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like super important and very special. So I started thinking about like, how do I do that? And so I came up with like, gosh, I gotta find metal tubes. I'm like, I gotta find metal tubes because metal is more modern than paper, and I've got these titanium scales, and it's like, it's gonna work. I'm like, I hope they exist. Dude, they exist. I found them. I was like, yes. So I dug around the internet and I found them, and they come in all these different sizes. So I had to get samples and like found the one that fit the best. Not 100% perfect. It's like a little taller than I'd like, but it's close enough for sure. And so I was like so pleased when I got it. And at this point, it's like, you know what? The cost of this stuff, like it matters, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like it costs what it costs. Obviously, there's such a thing as a prohibitive cost, but it's like
Right.
most of the time when people are pricing out packaging, they're like, how cheap can we get it? How cheap can we get it? I'm thinking like, let's just not let this get out of hand. But like they're buying this tube, right? Like they're buying this tube. I want them to want this tube as bad as they want the knife. And
Sure.
so I'm willing to, and I can't keep jacking the price of the knife up. Like this is going to eat into profits to do this the way I want, bottom line, but it's got to be done like this because or else I'm not freaking doing it, you know? And so I've sourced the tube. Now, prior to that, I had already had this idea in my head of custom artwork for my packaging.
Mhm.
But I didn't know like what I was going to package it in until I had the tube vision. But I had started the process of like seeking professional illustrators. And I knew that I wanted comic book style art because when I was a kid, I was into comic books, not like a super duper comic book fan, but I always had them around.
Oh yeah.
And like my mom would send them to me when I was at summer camp. And I was like, always loved the Hulk. He was my favorite. And like this brand of comics came out called Image Comics when I think it probably in the early 90s. And like the artwork was just like, wow, like holy crap, like this is awesome. That was Spawn,
Oh sure.
was an
Yeah.
Image comic,
Yeah.
and some others. And so I just really wanted comic book style artwork for my packaging. And so, dude, I like hit up, I don't know how many of these artists, at least 10 or 12 of them. I dug around all over the internet, Instagram, finding people. I'm thinking none of these guys are going to call me back. They all are like so professional and their work is amazing. What are they going to want it to do with me? Well, no, man, I got calls back from almost every single one of them. That was super interesting, super like, exciting. But then I had to like interview them and explain my project. And I got a lot of really good feedback. People really liked what I was like coming up with. They wanted to work with me. I thought that was super cool. A lot of them had sentiments like, dude, I love what you're doing. Pretty much like this type of thing is disappearing. Like I used to do CD like artwork for CDs, like inside the jewel case. Well, now no one
Okay.
buys CDs, or
Right.
we did like,
Right.
DVDs, and now no one buys DVDs. And it's like, so a lot of this touch and feel packaging experience is disappearing with the digital age. So And a lot of these guys can really understand collectibles because, like, okay, this guy collects Funko Pops, this guy collects guitars, this guy collects like cars, like we all have what we're into. So everybody
Sure.
can kind of appreciate that.
Right.
And so, but like dudes are busy, or like they're really expensive. And so it's just like a kind of a interviewing till I found the right guy. And then I found for sure who I felt was the right guy. I liked his art. I liked his flexibility. He understood that I was a startup and that things were going to kind of be rapidly changing as we figure it out. And he just really kind of said to me, like, dude, I will roll with the punches with you. If you need something done over the weekend, I'll get it done over the weekend. I understand you're a startup. I just really want to work on your project. Just pay me what you can afford to pay me and let's do it. I was like, hell yeah. Like
doesn't get much better than that.
No, he's great. And so,
awesome.
And of course, I'll never underpay anybody. Like
Right.
People need to get paid for what they do, but
Of
it just was
course.
like, you're the right guy for me. And so once we had the tube, I was able to size the label to fit the tube. And it's like, now we have our box, we have our constraint. And now let's get super creative on these things, right? And so, like, I had named knives and I had reasons for the names of each one. And it's like, we don't have to let the names drive the art, but we can. And dude, it was just like so much time and energy invested in the concepts, the thumbnail sketches, the inking, the penciling, the inking, the coloring, and like, I mean, a lot. I don't know how to express it. A lot of time and effort goes into that artwork on those tubes. But to me, like, it has to be there. It just has to be there because when you buy my product, I want you to like spend time looking at that art. I want you to appreciate that art. I want you to get an emotional response. I want you to be like, dude, this jar is freaking cool. This artwork is freaking cool. You open it, there's going to be some surprises inside. I'm not revealing everything, but you're going to love what's inside. And then ultimately, eventually, you're going to open a knife and you're going to be like, well, this is awesome too. Like this guy gave me something that is freaking awesome and no one else has given me something like this.
I got all this stuff. I forgot there was a knife inside.
Right, exactly. It's like, and maybe if you would have had maybe not the perfect first impression of the knife, it's all gone because you're just so happy with all this other cool stuff you got,
Oh, that's awesome. No, and that was something that we talked about. It's all about the experience, and you're like, you want the tube or whatever comes with the knife, you want it to be just as collectible as the knife itself.
100%. Like, I don't want anybody throwing these tubes away. Like, don't do
Right.
that. Like, these are
Right.
cool, man. Like,
Right.
you save it. Keep your knives in the tube. Like, you unscrew the tube, look under the lid. There's like a compound there, so it's airtight. Like, put your weed in there. It'll stay fresh. Like, this tube is multi-use. Put your Q-tips in there for cleaning your guns or your knives. Like, have them out. They're sweet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the art with every production run. So it's like, if you like the Javelina Jack that Sean Tiffany drew, you better get it, dude, because the next time I run a Javelina Jack, it's going to have different artwork on it, and we're like, there'll be X amount of pieces with that art. It'll never get run again. That's my plan. And I don't see what would derail it. It creates so much more work for me because I'm spending money to do art and I'm engaging with a brand new art, and it's going to be a new artist too, because that way the art stays super fresh and has a new style.
Right.
And it's like, that's a ton of work for me, but like, it ain't work, right? Like you said, if you're enjoying yourself, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm just chomping at the bit to get knives sold so I can start another artist and develop 11 new pieces of art,
And that's kind of, what I don't know, we talked about that a little bit, is you're talking about, I'm not going to be able to put it in the same words that you did, because obviously you've had this plan in your head for quite some time, but it was like, you're going to roll them out, the however many you start with, whether it be 10, 12, whatever the case may be. and they have their cover material and so on and so forth. And then at some point, you know, you're going to keep hopefully developing new knives, but at some point you could actually redo the javelina in different cover materials. And so, you know, you might see some, and like you said, different artwork, different cover materials. You can revisit an older design, but freshen it up a bit.
Absolutely. I just want to caveat this. I have these great plans, but like I will always meet limitations from the manufacturer or just factors outside of my control. But if this goes the way I plan it, and I don't see why it can't, right? Like I don't see this as being impossible. That's exactly what I want to do. Every time I reproduce a knife, let me get myself in frame. There's cutting the top of my head off. Every time I reproduce a knife, I want to change something about it. Might be subtle, might be a little dramatic. Like a subtle change would be add another flute to the bolster. Everything stays the same, right? That'd be a very subtle change. A more dramatic change would be like delete the bolster, make it a shadow pattern. That's when it just has the pivot screw and the rest of the handles micarta.
Sure.
Or an even more dramatic change would be like, hey man, last time you made it with a clip point, now he's made it with a spear point, right? And then if I can get it going, now it's a 2-blade knife instead of 1-blade knife. Now it has a pen blade. Now it has a bottle opener, right? So it's like, and that's something I learned from Bill Howard, man. When that guy
sure.
remakes a knife, dude, he changes something. Or it could just be as simple, right, as different cover materials. Everything stays the same.
Right.
But it's like, why make the same knife twice if I could switch it up a little bit? Because as a collector, there's nothing more frustrating and exciting about the fact you gave me a reason to buy more of them. It's like, damn you, damn it, I have 20 of these, right? And it's like, now I got to get 25 because you just did them all with sheep's foots or whatever.
I already have 20 of these. What? And damn it, I want number 21.
Absolutely, right? It's like, oh, I had the whole set. Now I can't not have the whole set.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right.
You know, it's like how many, and I think, and I don't collect modern knives the way other guys do, but I think like some of the modern makers are starting to catch on to that stuff with sprint runs, right? Like, okay, we're going to do a sprint one with this super steel and a sprint run with that super steel. Now all of a sudden the dude who had one PM2, because you can only get it one configuration, has 8 of them, right? Because he's collecting sprints.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, it's funny to me that a dude like Bill Howard's been doing it back when they've been doing that in the traditional knives for a long time, and you're starting to see it a lot more now with the modern knives. But from a collector's standpoint, dude, there's nothing more fun than when you get something you love just served up in a new way. You know, it's like your favorite sandwich and they put some kind of new spread on it. It's like, oh man, that's really good.
And Sprint Run is an excellent name because if you don't sprint, they're gonna run out.
Yep.
Because a lot of those, I mean, even the GECs and, Spyderco, the sprint runs and the modern, I mean, dude, we're talking 5 minutes and they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, of course there's a more limited number of them for sure. But I mean, I don't think it would matter, whether they did 500 or whether they did 1,000. I think they'd still be gone in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I mean, GECs, that's the thing about, and it's just like you said, they change that subtle little thing and it might still be a number 86, but it's not a number 86. It is a number 86, right, but it's a different number 86. And didn't I just see, and I know KC and I have been talking about this, isn't it the 86 or the 83? They're coming out with three new variations of that pattern of knife. So they're not just going to give us one.
Nope.
That we want to buy. They're going to drop. Now, I don't know if they're going to do it all at the same time. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Well, they're going to run 86 until they're done. So they might not drop at the same time.
Right.
But they're all coming out until the next pattern comes out.
Sure.
And it's like, yes, it's 3 variations, but that first variation might come in 3 different colors, right? The second variation does the same. And now, so it's like, holy, what if I want to collect the set, I got to buy 9 of them,
Right.
9 of
Right.
them. And
And
it's
that,
like, if you have the means to do it, if you're blessed to have the means to do it,
right.
why not, man? It's fun, like you don't always get them. So as frustrating as that is, like that's what makes it that much more rewarding when you get them. Like there's no sweet without the sour in life.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And in mentioning KC, I think you're starting to maybe create a little bit of a monster there, because you've been sending him the GECs and stuff to check out, and he's like, man, he's like, I really wasn't into slip joints, but these are really, really nice knives. And then that was like the first batch, and then you sent him a second batch, right? And he's like, now all of a sudden he's like we were just talking about, he's like, man, did you see that number 86 that's coming out? He's like, all like, he's like,
Yeah.
he's like, what? I think it was this. I think they're doing one as a single bladed Barlow, I think.
Yep. For blade forums.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
got,
And he's like, that one looks really cool, man. He's like, it's so funny. I think you've got him hooked, man. I don't know, but
you know what? It's like he's got whether or not the full blown virus sets in, he's certainly got some symptoms right now,
oh yeah,
right?
oh he
Whether or
does,
not he'll
he
be able to
does.
fight it off, we shall see. I'm obviously trying to get him completely infected, and I'm not going to stop until he's like, please stop sending me these things. But it's like, dude, he's primed for it, man. Like I think he's kind of like, some of these other reviewers, they're in their early 30s or even in their 20s. Well, Casey, you're a young guy, but you're not that young, right? And like I know your dad would whittle those walking sticks and like slice apples with his slip joint. It's like you have that sentiment and you've had that emotional experience, but you just never got to handle like some of the good ones. You haven't had that a chance
Right,
to really appreciate the art form in its like in a high form of it.
right.
And I was like, and I really like his reviews
Oh yeah.
because he's like thoughtful and thorough, and I just like his style. And so I was like, man, I got to send him a couple of these. If there's anybody who will appreciate this, I think it's him.
I tell
And
you,
you just go
well,
ahead.
I'm not. I mean, and he's like, well, here, man. He's like, I need your help. Like, what's this mean? And what's this mean? I was like, man, I can help you a little bit, but I'm not like, he's like, what's SFO mean? I was like, dude, I didn't know until I had a channel. I mean, I don't know, or triple P, or, he's like, what's all this mean? And I'm going through and I'm sending him links of, basically kind of how I learned, and looking it up. And I was like, here, this has got some information and this place has got some information. He's like, how many of these are there? And I sent him, oh, shoot, I can't remember what link it was, but he's like, he was like, okay, there's a number 15 and there's a number, and I was like, oh no. Yeah, there's a number 15 in like 8 or 9 different variations.
Yeah, at
So
least.
you're not talking you're talking about 1 through 80, we'll say, but you got like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 2A, 2, I was like, dude, you're gonna get deep. It's gonna get deep,
Yes.
and it's a lot to absorb. It's a lot to absorb. And I'm like, I can help you a little, but I'm definitely not the expert that you need to talk to. And he's like, I think I need to talk to Ben. And I was like, you probably do.
Yeah.
Ben's
It's
the
like,
guy
let me be your tour guide into the
yeah.
rabbit hole. I hope you have
Yeah.
some time. Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, that's a part of it. Not everybody will appreciate and enjoy. Some people are like, that's way too much for me. Like, I'm not interested in like the number what and then this and then that. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do I get one of these? Like, get out of here. And I
Right.
totally get that. I
Right.
totally get it. But for people who like, it does kind of push their buttons a little bit and get them excited. It's like, I love to see them get excited about that stuff. And like with my project, it's like, yes, I'm going to the slip joint guys, I know how to get them excited. But for me, man, if I can get the modern guys to be like, dude, like, whoa, what is that? You know, like that's in the materials I like, but it looks so weird. Like, why is the handle wavy like that? It's like, what the heck are these tubes? You know, it's like, I got you and you didn't even know it. You know,
Yeah,
I got you with the slip joint bug. I just had to like tune it up for you a little bit, make it a little more
sure.
familiar.
Sure. Well, and I think it all goes into that. The artwork and everything else, it all plays into that
Yeah,
without a doubt. Because like you said, you're not just creating a knife, you're creating an experience. And that's the cool thing about it. And I'll speaking for myself is like I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to get every single one. But trust me, I've got my eye on a couple that I know for sure I want to get my hands on, And we're just, back to what we were talking about before. It's just people have to be patient. People have to be patient. You've got your vision, you've got your goals. And in the world we're in right now, it's going to take a little bit of time. And as you and I were talking too, that puts you in quite a position. It really, really does. And we kind of touched on that before, because it goes back to that, okay, you told us 6 months and now you told us 8 months. Well, the reason you're telling us that is because that's what you're getting told. You have
hmm
no control over that. And that does put you in a tough spot, and it's a bummer. But you got to stick with them. We got to stick with them. If this is a product that you're really into, we got to see it through.
Yep.
And that's all there is to it.
Yep. Exactly. Like there's a lot of headwind right now, right? Like there's a lot. And so it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to want to quit, but it's like, I'm not quitting and I'm not getting discouraged. I'm going to stand in this wind and I'm going to deal with it. And, have a good attitude along the way, and I'll keep you guys informed. Only thing I ask is stick with me, be patient, try to stay excited, because I can't snap my fingers and make it happen. And no one trying to do what I'm doing right now can do that. So, like, if we can, it's hard these days to have patience, to exercise patience when we become a society that can order something on Amazon and like literally shows up in 2 hours. You know what I mean? It's like patience basically doesn't exist.
Right.
But there's an old adage, and it's always true: good things are worth waiting for.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah.
And so, that's really my only ask is everybody stick with me. Guys who are doing projects like mine, stick with them, give them a break. If they're doing their best, they're being honest with you, have a little patience. If they had a Kickstarter, if they had a pre-order, they only took your money because they needed it to make the project happen. They're not going to Vegas to spend it in the casino. You know what I mean? So like, it's super frustrating, I know, but feel how frustrated that dude is right now.
Well,
He,
exactly.
yeah, he said something, and there's nothing he wants more than for that to come true, but it's out of his hands.
Right.
So I think as a community, I think where you're going with this, I think it's a super important message is like, hey guys, we're a community, and we got folks in the community who are taking some really big risks to try to do something awesome for the community. So like, let's be patient with them. Let's support them. Let's not get too upset with them if they're, honestly deep down inside trying to do the right thing by us, right? If someone
Absolutely.
has the wrong motives and they're trying to take your money and, be bad, well, then we deal with that accordingly. But I don't think a lot of people who are in my position are trying to do that. I think they're really just trying to do a good job.
Oh, without a doubt. No, I think that's an absolutely perfect way to say it. We are a community, and like you said, there's guys in the community that are trying to just put out the best product possible, and with a little bit of patience and a little bit of, it's gonna come through. It's gonna come
hmm
through, and we just gotta support, man. 100%. 100%. Dude, thank you so very much for coming on here and doing this tonight. I know we kind of started this conversation at one point and I was like, we were like, man, we have got, I really wanted to get this in front of people. I really, really hope it goes over well, because it's a fantastic message, and it's one that, as I said before, I think the community really, really needs to hear. And we're with you, man. We're with you. I'm here. I know we got to be patient, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know you're going to be at Blade Show West.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely going to be coming by, saying hi, and actually getting an opportunity to see the knives and check them out. And it's going to be fun. I'm really, really looking forward to that. Absolutely.
Me too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for giving me a voice. It's like, in my position, sometimes you don't know what you should or shouldn't say and how much you should reveal. And it's like this whole thought process. But like ultimately, I like to communicate. I like to be honest. And you give me an opportunity to share my message. And that's not easy to do. I spend a lot of time doing other stuff. And I certainly don't have the time to run a YouTube channel. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so for you to cooperate with me, to give me a voice, like, it just means a lot to me, man. And
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for that.
It's I just, well, thank you, because really, without you guys making knives, I'm just sitting here doing doing really nothing. And it's a fun experience for me. I'll admit. You want to talk about being honest? This is absolutely, I still think this is just one of the most amazing things that I've done, is being able to sit here and talk to designers, knife makers like yourself about something that I enjoy so much. It's the truth. I just think, I get I start to fanboy out a little bit, because it's just awesome that we're able to do that. And it's just really, really cool. And I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit down and talk with me about this stuff. It's just awesome, and it's a lot of fun.
Me too. I think it's fun too, man. And you know what? We're doing something right if we're both sitting here on a Sunday night, almost 11 o'clock, and we're having fun. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, we're doing something right, man.
Staying out of jail.
That's right. That was my chemistry teacher in high school. You say, stay out of trouble, stay out of jail.
Yeah.
That was like how she sent us off every day. It's like, I'm trying.
I'll do my best. I'm not making any promises, though.
Right.
Right. Well, thank you so much again, Ben. I really, really appreciate it. Guys, check out Jack Wolf Knives. I'll leave links down in the description where you guys, I'll link all of Ben's Instagram and website and everything. You guys can go check it out and just see what Ben has to offer. And if yeah, it's amazing, guys. Just go check it out and be patient, and we'll have some really cool knives here pretty soon. So good talking with you, man. I hope to see you. And I will see you in Long Beach.
See you then. Take care.
All right, man. Take care.